What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the TCG Empire YouTube channel. Today we are going over Tech Tuesday. If you're new here, you're not sure what it is, it's where we take the deck of the week and talk about ways in which you can make the deck better or ways that you might be able to counter the deck of the week. This week we did take a look at Gengar VMAX paired with Houndoom, being able to deal massive amounts of damage if you're playing Vs, and also massive amounts of damage just overall with the second attack that Gengar has. So today we are going to be going over cards that you can really run in your deck to possibly increase, your matchup percentage, things like that, and some decks that you might want to play. So the first card that we are going to talk about is Regigigas. Now, again, this is a placeholder similar to last week or 2 weeks ago, where it's just really any one prize deck. But Reggie's actually does have a really good matchup into Gengar VMAX, as Gengar VMAX does have to damage itself to kind of build momentum, but also it can't use the first attack to do 60x the amount of Vs in play because you are playing no Vs on board. So this means that they do have to use their second attack, which does one-shot you, but in turn they can't attack during the next turn. And if they do accelerate one energy onto it, with Houndoom, means they put themselves in range of Regigigas being able to KO, and on top of that you do have Regirock, which can one-shot. So overall, single prize decks will be really good into this matchup, especially because you're getting 3 prizes off of the VMAX and they're only getting 1, and they have to commit so many resources, or they have to possibly 2 to 3 shot you depending on how much HP you have. So like Regigigas, for instance, they're gonna have to 3 shot you unless they do have multiple single strike energies attached. So I forgot to mention, Zach is here with me as well. I'm so sorry for that, Zach. Zach is here with me. He's going to be talking about some cards, so we're going to change it up. He's going to let you guys know on why Ting Lu is a good deck to play against Gengar. So what do you think, Zach?
So I think Ting Lu has a very good matchup into Gengar for a lot of different reasons. First off, Ting Lu is a predominantly EX based deck, which means that, like the Regis, you don't give them access to that first attack, and you're also doing enough damage similar to the Regigigas, where if they accelerate any energies to the Gengar, then you're taking a one shot with Land Scoop. And then if you have damage counters placed on the Houndooms, then the Cursed Land ability will actually shut off the Houndoom's acceleration. So at face value, the Ting Lu deck does feel like it almost hard counters Gengar to the point where, like, if this does become like a standard deck as far as like people playing Gengar, Ting Lu almost feels like a no-brainer to play in that meta.
And in the situation where for some unknown reason you can't attack with Ting Lu, if they're stuck having to, swing with a Houndoom, if they do actually put damage counters on themselves with the ability and put it on Houndoom, that means it turns Houndoom's ability off inherently, so Curse Land is super solid. And then next we have Galarian Zapdos V. Now you won't get this for its full extent because Gengar will never put enough Vs in play to where you can only attack for a single fighting energy, but being able to play this inside of something like Lost Box where they might have 1 to 2 Gengars out, they'll for sure have one, and if they want to, they'll build a second one up on the bench. So at most, you'll be able to, get rid of 2 energy costs, which means that a Mirage Gate in Lost Box allows you to hit for 340 damage for weakness, because Gengar is weak to fighting in the card game. So inherently, you'll be able to actually set up a good swing turn and a good momentum turn as you're trading 2 prizes for 3. And not to mention that because Galarian Zapdos is a V, but it's only 1 V in play, they're only going to be doing 60 damage, and so it's overall really good. One other thing I forgot to mention, I'm pretty sure that Gengar does 60x and not 60 plus 60, if I'm not mistaken. Let's see real quick. Technical difficulties. Okay, so it does 60x, so Fear and Panic. So back to the aspect of one prizer decks, that means that they have to use their overextending attack, which, similar to like we talked about with any one prizer deck against Giratina, they have to overcommit a lot just to be able to, take a single prize, and that really punishes them for really doing what their deck's supposed to do. So any one prizer deck is super solid considering that it's 60x, which means that with Galarian Zapdos, they're only doing 60 damage. So they're going to have to do a super big, beefy attack, which means that, yes, they will, get 2 prizes, but you'll get 3, which means that you put yourself in a position to possibly, search and dig in order to get the Zapdos back and go for game there. So overall, those are kind of the counters that you can really run into. And then again, I'm not sure if Zach mentioned it, but with Ting Lu, it is an EX. So again, it doesn't count towards that 60x, which means that they do have to kind of go for their big attack. Now, most of the time they will, because Ting Lu does have 240 HP, but it still means that they have to rely on using an attack that they can't use the following turn, and it gives you a turn to kind of buy time. So those are really the counters that you can play to beat Gengar if you're having a hard time. Maybe try a different deck, or again, try the Galarian Zapdos tech, see how it works out. Next, we're going to be going over some cards that you can play within Gengar that might not be the norm, but they could improve, your matchups if you start running into these things. So the first card being Cheryl. I'm going to let Zach talk about this one.
So Cheryl does kind of seem sneaky good for Gengar to play, because outside of getting hit for weakness, Gengar is very hard to take down, but your opponent kind of does get rewarded for going for that 2-shot because it is worth 3 prizes. So if you get hit for, like 200, 180, something like that, that sets up the 2-shot, then being able to Cheryl that off and reset the Gengar is really nice. And because of Houndoom's ability to just accelerate energies back into play, it means that can keep that momentum in your favor for even longer and make it even harder for those decks that don't have like direct counters to do anything significant against you. But it also does make the 1-prizer matchup a little bit better, because outside of something again like Reggie's or something that's hitting for weakness, 1-prize decks usually are around like that 100 damage range. So if they're doing 100, 110, then they can 3-shot you and you'll 1-shot them and back, so it's a 3 for 3. But if you throw a Cheryl in there, then that one Gengar can almost take you all 6 prizes. So Cheryl does seem pretty good to run in Gengar, in my opinion.
And the next card that we have is more of a healing factor, but it is Radiant Serena. Again, like Zach said with Cheryl and being able to kind of heal that damage, Radiant Serena is more of a situational Radiant that you can play within the deck. It's mainly in here because if you don't have Path to the Peak out, and let's say you need to accelerate 2 single strike energy, but you can only afford to take 20 damage, it means that you can accelerate both and then heal 20 damage from yourself, and then possibly put Path back into play to shut your opponent off. So overall, it's really just something that's kind of a safe goat, but it does guarantee that you at least get to freely attach 1 energy with the Houndoom ability, providing that Path to the Peak isn't in play. So overall, like I said, it's similar to Cheryl, but it's more of a situational one where rather than, risk being KO'd from a 2-shot or a 3-shot, being able to heal all that, this is so you don't get 1 shot, but you can still accelerate in order to have a big momentum swing on your end. Next, we're going to talk about Picnic Basket. Zach, feel free to talk about this one.
So unlike Radiant Serena, where I kind of view that card as being more defensive, you're trying to heal off damage you're doing to yourself, I view Picnic Basket as that card that allows you to be offensive. So this is mainly in here for that Ting Lu counter, because Ting Lu can shut off the Radiant Serena, but it can't shut off Picnic Basket. So if your Houndooms end up with damage on them in that matchup, then you can heal it off, accelerate the energy to Gengar, and take that big 1-shot onto Ting Lu with GMAX Swallow Up. So that's kind of where Picnic Basket differs from Serena. It lets you be more offensive in that kind of matchup, whereas Serena, you're more than likely going to be healing to avoid being knocked out. Picnic Basket is going to let you gain that momentum back and be way more aggressive.
And then the next card we have is Cross Switcher. Now, Cross Switcher is a unique card to play with Gengar, but the reason why it's in here is because if you are in situations where you are playing against those awkward 1-prize decks, where you can't really use the first attack of Gengar and you have to use GMAX Swallow Up, yes, you can play Switch, and yes, you can play Escape Rope, but Cross Switcher is another way that will kind of let you alleviate your play. If there's something on the bench you want to target, but you also need to reset a Gengar, it gives you the chance to Cross Switcher, that active to the bench, and then it lets you, possibly reset if you have a switch in your hand, and you can KO the bench Pokemon you brought up. And the good thing is that being a boss effect, but also being able to switch you, it means that it resets your attack, but also gives you the chance to use a supporter for the turn, which means that you can potentially disrupt your opponent with something like Iono Path or even Judge Path. And then you can also do things on the more defensive, like playing Cheryl and then being able to accelerate the energy back, so that way you're not getting one shot on the return of KOing something you want. So that's really the niche for cross switcher. It's not super necessary, but it is a good factor in being able to kind of reset yourself when you need to do multiple swings in a turn. Kind of similar to how Mew VMAX ran cross switcher. Now most of the time they would have 2 Mews out with 2 DTEs, and they would switch between them because Mew does have free retreat. But there was the situation of cross switcher, just in the aspect of you only had 1 Mew in play, so it can be relatively good. And then finally we have full face guard. This was Zach's tech, so I'm going to let him talk about that.
So full face guard is kind of a card with a unique stipulation to it, where in order for the effect to take place, you have to have no ability on the Pokemon it's attached to, which Gengar VMAX does not. It's just a big heavy hitter. And what it does is it lets you take 20 less damage after applying weakness and resistance. So with this on there, it means that you can, in the matchups that are hitting you for weakness, it means you might be able to potentially survive something like that. And then it also makes the one prizer matchups a little bit better because you're taking even less damage. So if we go back to that previous example of them doing like 100, 110 per turn, if you take that down to 90, that means that they're going to have to 4-shot you, which is a 4 for 3 prize exchange out of their favor. So even without Cheryl, just full face guard can turn that prize favor from being equal to being in your favor. So full face guard is kind of a weird card, but I think it could see some niche applications here and there depending on what you're trying to avoid hitting in the meta.
So overall, those are kind of the things that you can play within Gengar, or cards that you can play, if you want to try to improve your Gengar matchup. Gengar is more of a meta call than it is a dominant deck. It really depends on what's being played. There's multiple one prizers in format, and your meta is filled with things like Regis or Lost Box. It might not be the best deck to play, but if there are things like Mew or heavy decks that run a bunch of Vs that you can gain momentum off of, they're super solid cards. So definitely keep an eye out for Gengar as a deck and consider these techs. But overall, I think that's really it. So thank you guys for watching today's video. If you did enjoy it, smash that like button, subscribe, turn on post notifications. Otherwise, I will catch you guys in tomorrow's episode of What to Buy Wednesday.